Subdivision work session for August 4th, 2022, Town of Chesapeake Beach, Maryland. I'm calling to order and we have all four commissioners except for Mr. Larry Brown. So, Madam Clerk, if you would indicate that Mr. Brown is not with us today, that'd be great. Number two, we have the approval of August 4th planning and zoning work session agenda. Do I hear a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
And I'll second it.
Discussion.
Yes, please.
So I see on the agenda, it has the table of permitted uses by district. And then in item 6, it says overview of the next 6 months. And I'm a little bit confused about how we're going to proceed. Are we going to only deal with the table of permitted uses today?
Well,
Or are we going to deal with the other?
We have building height, we have permitted uses. And if there's anything else you wanted to add, you certainly, add it to the, add it to this agenda if you'd like.
Okay, well, I think the rest of what we need to deal with is density. And we will need to deal with the map again. I will be making motions on the map. We don't need to discuss it at length, but I would like maybe
Okay,
10 minutes to,
This is a workshop, so we're not going to be making any motions. We're going to be just
yeah,
discussing, issues. But
yeah.
would you like to move that we add density and you want to add the map as well? You can make that one motion. So we need a second and approval on that.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to address all of the concerns that residents brought up to us in our work session. And before we pass the code to the town council. That's,
Okay, so.
I don't want to ignore the residents.
So your motion is to, I
move to add density in the map.
any second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I think that's everyone.
What happened to the feedback?
The feedback is a number,
Three.
Ah, yes, I did.
okay, so we're gonna go ahead and add density and map to the agenda. We are now going to, go ahead and make a motion to approve the agenda as amended. So can we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
And I'll second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, no opposed. So let's go into number 3, Mr. Kubiak.
Okay, good public hearing, by the way, last,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was
Couple weeks ago. yeah. So I got a lot of comments noted in my notes, and Sharon provided the note cards, as we call them, for all the comments. So, and I know she emailed them out to everybody, so you have those. Just in general characterization, if I could, seemed like there was strong support for resource conservation and the protection of open space. There were a couple comments with respect to how the resource conservation area is applied in existing subdivisions. And by that, I mean the Wackersham subdivision. I may be mispronouncing that, but this is basically the area that's zoned RV now. And we have 2 comments there, or actually 1 question, 1 comment. I talked to the questioner before the meeting, and that's, I think, in part why you didn't get into it much. I think I might have helped him out before the meeting. But we have another, that was Mr. McKay, John McKay.
Yes.
And then Mr. Goldsmith, Gary Goldsmith, also submitted something for the record before the hearing, and I think you all have that as well. In those situations, we have these very small lots, and in each case, they're consolidated into bigger property holdings, and each person has a house on the collection of lots. With the RC zoning, those collection of lots could not be subdivided into buildable lots. for future houses, which would entail the removal of the trees and probably some substantial grading and clearing as well, because the land is really steeply sloped through that area. And that's why it shows up as resource conservation. Mr. McKay specifically said, well, why is my house, in this zone? I mean, I own all these other properties. I kind of could see why you might draw the line that way, but my house is totally cleared. It sits up on the top. It's the one that's on Cox Road. As you drive by, it sits kind of proud up there, but right beyond his rear yard, it slopes down right down to the marsh. Fair point. The way I drew it when I did the mapping was to sort of collect all these kind of properties together generally, and the building height was mentioned, and support for it by a number of people, including Mr. Rasmussen, and some other folks. I can't recall their names, but there was a question, though, about the application of the building height to existing buildings that already reach 35 or exceed 35 feet. But I think I answered that question during the hearing, or maybe afterwards. So in the short answer to that is they become non-conforming. They're essentially legally grandfathered and could be rebuilt or replaced in kind, rather not larger. I mean, but they could be as tall if they were destroyed even if they were taken down because it was time to repair and restore a house. I mean, they could be built back to the same building height. That's the way the code is currently written, and that's in the non-conforming section of the zoning ordinance. There was a question about seafood processing in the Maritime Commercial District, and why is this listed as a special exception use? I mean, why wouldn't this simply be permitted outright? I mean, it is the historic waterfront. Well, the answer to that is it's in part is that's the way it's always been. It's the way the code is now. It's a special exception. But also those types of uses could be pretty dramatic in terms of their impact. And this zone has always been a bit of a mix of commercial uses, restaurants and seafood processing to some level, and hotel, all this other stuff. And up until recently, housing as well. So the spillover effects of introducing something that could be clearly industrial could be really adverse. The question is, there's a fair question though, can it still be permitted? And maybe it's something that could be approved without a serious consequence, because housing now is removed from the whole waterfront area. And I know that for a fact that seafood processing is taking place at Abner's on a small kind of scale, but it's not processing in the sense that there's a factory and canning or anything like that. But there's certainly the cultivation of oysters and the moving oysters from their tank and using spat, and their trucks come in there and all that. And that's kind of a use that's been going on for a long time. So anyway, so there's that question of whether it should remain a special exception use. I kind of think on balance, because of the potential for seafood processing to be almost heavy in terms of industrial implications, it doesn't hurt for it to be a special exception. We do have residences there. We have high density housing right next to it. We have the water, we have the critical area, we have sea level rise. We have a lot of factors that just make sense that it goes through a higher level of review. Which means it goes to the Board of Appeals to get an approval of the use, and then it comes to Planning Commission for site plan approval. There were, within the Chesapeake Village subdivision, I think in some extent within Richfield Station, there were a lot of questions about RC and how it is applicable to the land that is held by the HOAs, and how it might affect FIDs. And there was a general kind of support for the comment that the previous person said. And I think when you boil it down, it seemed like the biggest issue was preserve the land and don't do anything that's going to undermine the preservation of the land. if there's something more nuanced than that, I've kind of missed it. I have another in multiple locations, agrees with others. So that was a kind of a theme throughout at least 5 of the speakers. I thought there's one other. I also have a comment about amendment number 9, the open space regulations. But for the life of me, I couldn't figure out who said that or what it was about. And I don't see it in our written comments here. But at some point, someone must have mentioned the open space requirements that we're introducing. Maybe it was just a question that I handled and said there's 1,000 square feet per dwelling unit for any project over 3.
I think I remember the question.
Okay.
It was a question about how will that apply, and is my mic on? Can you all hear me?
No.
It was a question about how the open space requirement would apply in Richfield Station with the new development. And I think to some extent to like the town commercial, the neighborhood commercial, the other areas.
That's right. And the short answer is as those new developments have been approved already and they're platted. So, and this is really applicable to residential projects, and they're confined to the residential zoning districts. So not a real actionable type of comment there. So that's just kind of the overview with some specifics linked in for the commission. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Jakubiec. Any questions for staff down here? Kelly?
No.
Lori?
No questions, but I would like to comment that there were several people that did bring up density as a concern.
Mr. Jakubiec, do you want to address that?
Yes, actually, I have that too. Amy Everett on Hillgale has a question about increasing density, and you might have a comment her. She said that there was kind of a reluctance to see the encouragement of infill development. Let's see if I can find her. No, I got a little confused, but it was Amy Everett, but she said that verbally here. She didn't put it in her written comments. So.
Yes, and several people seconded her feeling about
Oh, is that?
the higher density, yes, at the hearing.
Writing, I want to disturb her. Jan, what would you have to say? Anything? Do you have any questions for Mr. Jakubiec?
No, I don't. I thought it was a great meeting, actually.
Okay. Kat, anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, I did think it. Pardon me. I do think the meeting was well attended. It was nice to see a little bit of a cross section of the town, but I think the overriding point and was about the development, and the message was really loud and clear. And if there was any question before, I know we had great discussions about the short-term rentals, and there was a lot of feedback from the townspeople and developers, and I mean, the message was clear as a bell. So it's nice to see, to have a real sense of what the community wants, and that was very obvious. I also appreciate Dr. Rasmussen speaking about, from his experience, about the 35-foot height requirement. Again, I think it goes in conjunction with the density. I mean, we want to reduce the density, but even with the reduction of the density, if you have height, it still undermines the fact that we've reduced the density. As long as the landscape has been, the height remains above 35 feet, we're still going to be impacted from that. So, thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to comment that I also appreciated, we had I think a biologist from Owings who was here talking about endangered. I was really grateful that she came in and reminded us how important our endangered species are and our birds. I know that I was talking to, I think the planner in North Beach one day, and he said they have actual tours coming into North Beach for birding, just birding alone. So birding is becoming a big thing down here, and we have to be cognizant of the fact that especially that 200 acres back there is a huge area for nesting and different options for birds to be able to use for their homes and whatnot. So we have to be very careful about that RC, that resource conservation area, and protecting it. And so I was glad that she came in and responded. And I was also really impressed with how many people showed up to a July meeting, a summer meeting. You know, I'm from a town of 30,000 and I couldn't get 5 people in the audience at any one time ever. But we were the little tiny 6,000 people town, and we can get, we had 50 people. I couldn't believe it. I was really impressed and amazed. And it showed you the amount of passion and dedication they have to this town, and how much they love this town, how they want to protect it. I mean, it blew my mind. So, the job that we have up here is extremely important, and we've got to get it as right as we can. We're not perfect, but we're going to try and get it as best we can, so that we can all come out of this feeling like we've done a satisfactory job, to save everything, the bay, the birds, the people, everything that we can. So, again, if anybody's watching, I want to thank everybody who did attend and testified and gave us some, interesting perspectives. So thank you for coming again last July 27th, that last meeting we had. Okay. Yes.
I just want to offer that I took a great photo, and I think it's going to be a winner this year in the calendar today, of a heron. And I could almost touch his wing, and then he took off
Out there off of the
boardwalk.
Yes.
So
yes, he's back there. He's back and forth over there all the time.
it's first prize. So I just
There's
no money in the prize.
It doesn't matter. We're so proud of that
bragging
particular
rights.
heron. Yeah.
But and I just want to say that the comments of the biologist, it was
Yes.
like, you forget that.
Yeah.
At least I do, and it's nice because that's what's compelled people to come here.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it just
And the fact that we are now a tourist destiny for this, for what we have to offer here in this very environmentally sensitive area, which we can't stress enough. I mean, we just can't stress enough. So, and from somebody from the West Coast, I'm from the West Coast, and I've seen them overdevelop. We don't want to get there, because once we get there, we can't retract it. We can't take it away. So anyway, let's
Madam
move.
Chair?
Yes.
The Living Bird magazine, which is, I belong to the,
Ornithology.
The bird people.
Yeah, the bird people.
Cornell bird specifically. Every page is a state, a town, or whatever, advertising how many birds they have, what kind of birds, tours. I mean, it's a very big deal.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's getting bigger. So we want to be one of those big deals here, because that to me would be the best gift we can give our future generations, is if we can keep our birds and our animals that depend on this area. Okay, let's see the winner. Okay, excuse us all. We have to see the winner.
Oh, man.
Everybody has to see the winner here. Okay, very good.
no wait,
That's
hold
pretty
it.
haven't seen it
spectacular.
yet.
Oh no. Oh yeah. That's definitely a winner. It's got the wings coming out, I mean,
My
that's,
picture was in
oh.
December last year.
But he's our friend. He
I
just
had
he
an
walks us
honorable
down
mention.
there. Yeah.
Okay, no, wait.
Okay, this is really,
that's really
we are
cool.
out of control.
Thank you.
We are totally out of control here, people. Let's get back to this agenda before we have people leaving us here.
But Madam Chair, while we're doing this, I just want to say, as a new member, that I appreciate the concern of the citizens and what they said to us. But I think what really hammered it home was Dr. Rasmussen, and also the biologist that came in. And I took notes, and she talked about the wood starks that are coming in, that everybody came in for last week, and they brought tours in for that. And then the 3 billion birds that we lost. I mean, we don't realize that our actions that we take have big impacts.
Yes, exactly.
And we need to look at the bigger picture, not only in development, but also in our environment.
Yes. No, there's so many levels and layers to just protecting birds that we have to think about. It's not just the birds, it's everything that goes with that. So, but anyway, enough for our conservation efforts here. Okay. So let's go down to number 4, building height and its measurement. Mr. Jakubiec, would you like to start out the conversation?
Sure. I can start out with the definition that exists today.
Yes.
And an illustration, just to illustrate the
Yes.
definition.
Okay.
Thank you.
That definition's right from the zoning code. Oh, yeah, forgot. Looks like I gave away my. I should have the.
Yeah, would you like one of your
No, I have the book. I have the oracle here, the source.
I happen to have a copy, Chris, if you need.
And I actually have my code book, so I could actually
No,
go in
yeah,
there.
allow me. A
Yeah,
building's
we have one.
All
building
right,
height,
he's got
a
it.
building's vertical measurement from the level of the finished lot grade at the primary front entrance to the building to the highest point in the roof of a flat roof or roof having a slope of less than 15% from the horizontal, and to a point midway between the peak and the eaves of a roof having a slope of 15% or more. So just to boil it down, if it's a sloped roof, you measure 35 feet from the finished grade at the front door up to the midpoint between the eaves and the peak or the ridge. And that's what's shown on that illustration, you see. If it's a relatively flat roof, you see the drawing goes right up to the top of the roof, okay? So that's, literally and that's pretty much the scale. Spot on, actually, because I used illustrations we've done for other projects that, in combination with an architect, and I just kind of massaged the lines a little bit. But that's basically to scale. But the important thing is to demonstrate the difference between the slope and the flat.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
I have a question.
yes.
For Chris. So I see your diagram here, and the eaves, which is the triangle, the peak,
Yes.
how much higher than 35 feet is that? If this is flush with the other,
Yeah.
how
Oh,
much
I see what
higher
you're saying.
is that peak than the
In
35
that
feet?
particular image,
Well, what's allowable? So if this is 35 feet on the flat roof, when we're measuring from this eaves down, how much higher can that
Yeah.
peak be?
it can go, there is no limit. It would depend, and it depends on how big the box is. If you have a really big building and the roof, you have a slope roof, it needs to, of course, go up higher in order to cover the total plane of the building. So the definition doesn't speak to that. It says what it says. So yeah, the gist of it is that there could be some popping out of the building above the 35-foot max.
So I think that's how, in my neighborhood, there is a residence that from the center, the roof slopes like an elliptical almost. So there's 35 feet at center, but I think we're up to 50 feet on the wings. And so
There's another issue related to that, and I think it applies to that property, but also could apply generally too. And this is really getting into the weeds. Building height's measured at the front door. So if the grade drops off anywhere, you're going to have a higher vertical plane on the side of the building, which we call plane in architecture, is going to be taller because the slope drops off. Really, you're essentially exposing the wall of the basement, right? And then that's underneath 2.5 stories of building wall. So all of a sudden you've got a 44-foot wall rather than say a 32. Can you imagine the side that on the rear end of the slope. It could really expose the entire basement. So it could look like a 4-story building facing the other side. So these are the kind of tricky parts that a building height standard like this never captures. We don't encounter that very much, but it is something that happens from time to time. And there are different ways of dealing with that. We call it building height, building wall plane height. There's the building height, but there's also a maximum exposed wall that's possible too. To minimize that sort of that look of having a big blank wall 40 foot tall next to you.
Matt, do you have any other questions?
No, so I guess, unless I've misunderstood, so with a 35-foot height, depending on how large the building is, we could be going up 10 more feet above the 35.
Yeah, but it would have to be a really big building. That's right. But yes, theoretically, it is
So,
a really large building.
so a
yes.
typical 2,000 square foot home, well, the average would be maybe 4 feet.
I don't know, Kathleen, but it could be a variety of, because the roof, you could have a variety of peaks on something that big.
So does this compel one to say, then the limit should be 30 feet with this, that the eaves?
You've heard me recommend that from time to time, we should really get into this and think about that. If you want to see what a new 35, by the way, there are probably, if you discount what's happened here along the waterfront, there are probably 6 or 7 buildings in town that are 35 feet, right at 35 feet. So if you're going to kind of feel, you can go to C Street and see those buildings. Or if you want to see something under construction now, go to Elm Lane, which just off of Cox. Well, actually off of.
That's a nice house.
Well, this is a brand new house. It's under construction.
It's under construction. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Are we talking about the same one?
Maybe we're not.
It's on 27th.
It's not, maybe not.
Well, this is on Elm Lane. Elm Lane, if you're headed into town on
Okay.
Maryland 260, on Chesapeake Beach Road, you'll see the BG&E place, or forget that. Make a right onto Elm Lane before you get down to here.
Yeah.
And you'll be right over here by the kind of the where it slopes down. It's a very difficult lot, and it got approved by the Board of Appeals, and it's a postage stamp area where they could actually develop because there's wetlands, and we really hemmed them in. So they built 3 stories.
We're not talking about the
Yeah,
same
it's
one.
a, it's a
We're
very
talking about the
small,
same lot.
it's 20 foot wide, maybe 22 foot wide, and it's right at 35 foot. And you'll see what a 35 foot tall building looks like in a residential area. You'll ask yourself, well, is that compatible with the general character of Chesapeake Beach?
Are you
And you're
saying
gonna
too tall? Are you saying too high?
Yeah, you're going to say, no, it's not compatible. I mean, if you just look at that particular neighborhood, I had to approve it though. I don't have a standard that allows me to say, no, it's allowable building height. But
Even if it's not harmonious with the existing, the
Yeah.
complexion of the neighborhood?
that's a general purpose statement. It's not in code. I mean,
I thought that was in code about that it had to be, the design had to be harmonious with the neighborhood.
No, if we had it, like, you could go to 35 feet, provided that the following standards are met, it's determined to be found to be harmonious with, or something like that. Having compatibility standards is what I suggested as a way of kind of bridging the having more of a detailed set of architectural design standards and having something that has a more immediate thing. So it gives some cover to sort of saying no to certain projects, certain buildings. But anyway, that's beside the point. This is kind of water under the bridge of buildings, and it looks stark now and probably little out of the ordinary because the landscaping's not in. We made them plant all these trees to mitigate the impact, to bring it down to scale. And once they put the siding on it and then roof, you'll see that it feels better. But if you just imagine that building and place it somewhere else in town. And anyway, Kathleen, the peak of the roof there pops out about 3 feet above the 35 foot.
But it looks even larger because of the comparable, that the neighborhood houses
Yeah,
are
yeah.
not as high.
If it were in a row of like the houses on C Street, it would seem normal and it would say, oh, okay, I understand why it's 35 feet. But interesting though, that lot is dealing with some of the same environmental constraints that some of the other lots that are 35 foot. So that's what people do. I still like to have, 1,600 square feet of space. And the only way I can do that on these little lots is to basically have a townhouse. So it sort of reads as a townhouse building without being in a townhouse project,
Jan, any comments about the height?
No, I understand what Chris is saying, and I know there have to be judgment calls along the way, but it makes sense.
Ellie?
So in Richfield Station, where my house was built on Eagle View, they brought in dirt. So the front of my house doesn't look very tall at all. But I have a walkout basement. And as you walk out the front door and down the sides, I have this slope. And then when you walk around the back, it's very tall. Basically, it's the three. So I mean, it's the appearance when you look at the house or whatever is being designed. So yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, yeah, I have a concern over that 35 feet. And yes, I agree with you. I think there should be something addressing that peak once it goes over, maybe lowering it down to 30 feet. Because I mean, if they do an A-frame house and they have, realistically, if they have an acre and they do a wide A-frame house, that could make that peak significantly over that 30, 35 feet.
True, Kelly, but there is another element of this too. If what's driving the real estate decision is livable space, and that's what drives real estate decisions, someone will revert to the part of the definition that says 35 foot to the highest point, and they'll do a flat roof. And again, that peak, it does pop above, but it doesn't cover the entire space. So it's an intrusion above the imaginary line, but it's not building mass. The alternative is that it's 35 feet all the way across. So if you look at that drawing, and I think in the yellow line, or the yellow lines, I drew the building. So you think if you think it's impossible that someone would do a 3-story flat roof type of building, you only have to go to North Beach and see a few examples that were built years ago. I mean, I think it was a while ago. I used to work with the town a long time ago when those were built in North Beach. And I mean, I worked here once on the trail project. It was, people were a bit shocked that North Beach was allowing that, but that's what the code allowed because they just had the max at 35 feet.
So I work in Washington, and nothing can be built higher in Washington than the Washington Monument. And it's a flat law. You cannot build above it. And so if you're in Washington, D.C., that is the highest point. So I don't understand why we can't use that same regulation and say there will be nothing higher than a certain point.
Yeah, I think if the commission felt like you wanted to do that, I think now would be the time to change the definition to do that. But when we have more time and when we can engage with the community, I think we should consider lowering the building height to 30 feet, maybe even in some cases to 28 feet, candidly, so that buildings are built in more compatible ways with the historic character. I mean, the design standards, the whole chapter on community character all speaks to this. Those objectives are not achieved when you have a variety of sort of real tall, skinny houses scattered throughout the community. And it is possible. There's always a possibility that a house, not only is small, I mean, because, and Lori's talked about this a little bit, the buildable envelope that's allowed on every lot. You can actually think about, a lot being, say, like this big, and then you come in 10 feet off the sides or 8 feet off the sides and 15 from the back and 20 front. And then that leaves you with a pretty big volume. People think about that in just horizontal. You're like, okay, I can cover a building or cover this space with a building. But you can also take that all the way up to 35 feet, right? I mean, that's begins to be a really big house. And so what I'm suggesting is that modify the definition now if there's a consensus on the group, but allow us to really get into this issue and deal with the design implications and work with people in the community to understand what the impacts are. Because I can assure you that if there's anything that's going to get people out and also confused, it's like when you deal with these building height issues. And people take it personal, very personally, these particular design standards. But the other part of this definition is the point at which you measure going up. And Cindy and I have talked about this. In fact, it's been kind of a topic of conversation for well over a year on the Planning Commission from time to time. Is right now it says the finished grade. It doesn't reflect your concern about raising the grade. Conceivably, someone could raise the grade somewhat and then measure. I checked in. I have a planner's dictionary that defines all these terms in various jurisdictions. A lot of jurisdictions measure the grade from the finished grade if the finished grade is no taller than the existing grade. So there's a little caveat. Or they say from the existing or pre-development grade. Right? So you decide what you want, but I don't think the implication is that significant either way. There's generally not a pattern of like filling in. Your subdivision is different. All the new subdivisions, because the amount of mass grading that took place. There's no way to build on land until they raise the ground up or cut it down. But in the typical kind of already developed communities here, maybe not as, I guess it's conceivable in your neighborhood, Cindy, and I guess you could see that happening.
Oh, yes.
Grades dropping quite a bit. So you could measure grade from the finished grade, or measure height from the finished grade, like it is now, the existing grade. You can measure it from the height of the street or sidewalk that fronts the house. So you establish that kind of proportionate relationship to what everybody knows, and that's how you experience height as you travel along or as you walk along. You could say the pre-existing grade. However, you can have a caveat under exceptional conditions. The variation of this would be permitted. In other words, if it made sense for someone to raise their house up so you'd have with the sidewalk rather than sitting down in a hollow where it's inaccessible, although that could probably be handled through a variance type of procedure.
Yeah, we
Actually,
do
that's
have a
probably
couple
how it
houses that are below grade,
Right.
actually below street level, I
Yeah, you
should
do,
say.
yeah.
Yeah, we do have some of those.
Right.
So are you recommending that we take it down to 28 feet? Is that what your recommendation is at this point?
Not at this point. Not without a thorough evaluation of building styles, building houses, and the implications, and allow the community at large to really participate.
I think
Because it may not be.
may I come?
I'm sorry. It may be reasonable to do that in certain areas, and totally unreasonable to do it in other areas, even within the same zoning district.
Lori, go ahead.
Yes, I was wondering if maybe we could mitigate some of these problems with the roof sloping with a few massing regulations. We need to have some massing regulations anyways, and that would mitigate having one large roof. Is that feasible that you could recommend a few massing?
What is a
Um,
massing
Yeah, I don't know.
regulation?
So massing is like the mass of a building. So you have single family houses, but maybe on Cox Road, for instance, we're going to get a larger site plan. Well, if you had some massing regulations, it would require that the building mimic the massing of the single family houses. So it would have to be broken up rather than just one large Ocean City style building. It would need to have segments in it that mimic the massing of a single family house. So that's what massing is.
I'm not sure I understand what massing is.
We need another explanation.
Chris?
Yeah, it's a way of breaking down the mass or the size of the building into components that you can read as a human being. Like, where are the windows relative to the front door? Are there windows? Are there kind of use of materials to break down the the wall. If you imagine, for instance, one concrete or brick wall solid, and then look at one that's broken up by windows and maybe various trim on the siding. Both buildings are exactly the same size, the same size, but one feels much more massive, right? And it's like this brick wall hanging over you versus this wall that has openings and change of pattern and maybe dormers, that break into component. A porch does this. So Lori, again, I think that's a great idea, and I think that, and I hope that the commission will agree that's a good idea. But I don't think that's something we do in the abstract now with this sort of thing hanging over us and this desire to get these things done. I mean, we have key is to get this 35-foot done right now, in my view, but we need to follow up with really thorough evaluation of massing, design, intensity, all these issues, and they all work together. And they hit people where it matters in terms of how much livable space you can build on any given lot. And building footprint is a key factor here. Even though you tweak the amount of open space that's required from 15% up to 35%, it's really done nothing in the sense of bringing the possible mass down on the building, because that 35% can be captured within the required yards. What still exists is this volume of buildable area that exists on every lot that could be considerably large, especially if it's, you max out at 35 foot. But it requires a little, in fact, when I do this kind of work, we bring an architect in because you want really nuanced, refined kind of discussions about this. Anyway.
Lori, anything else?
Yeah, so for building height, I would be fine with keeping it at 35 feet and not allowing the roof. And also talking about measuring it from the average existing grade on the lot.
That's good. Because if it's average existing grade, so like they did in my house, where they brought it in at the front and then the house is built and then the front slopes down and then the back slopes down, then they would have to use the average grade of the whole lot, correct?
Yes.
Not just where the front door is.
Yep. Well, the only place that we would be dealing with that would be Cox Road. Right. And which area?
And where Cat lives over there on B Street.
Right, that's predominantly built out though, and I don't think that tall buildings
But they're
Or desired
they're
there.
raising properties and infilling is a problem.
Right.
So that's what we gotta worry about, infilling, like she's had next door to her.
The average grade across the front, which is how you experience it. What you're talking about is this exposed wall. I would encourage the commission to deal with that as a wall plane standard, not only the vertical wall plane but also the horizontal. But it gets a little complicated. But especially when your house is at a corner and it sort of imposes its burden on everybody, or is really close within a certain distance from another house. Then they got to sort of step that down, tear that down, and break down the mass, as you say. And you can do that. An architect does that. Architects do that all the time.
I think, if I might just add one thing, Lori, if you don't mind, we definitely have to talk about this entire big subject, because massing, as Lori says, is a huge issue and it's complicated. So I think we definitely need to come back, and address the entire, issue as one. But going to the recommendation we're going to send to the town council, my concern about this building height definition we already have in the code allows somebody to actually put the front door above a garage.
Mm-hmm.
They could build up 20 stairs like they've done in North Beach and allow the front door to be, another 20 to 30, even, 25 feet higher. So you could actually extend that height up to 40 to 50 feet, depending on where the front door is.
We
So-
did remove that definition though, correct?
No, this definition is right here. It's right in this
This-
definition. It says at the primary front entrance. So at the front entrance, and you'll go down to North Beach and see it all over the place where they have these huge front stairs. But a lot of the people access from the inside the garage. So you don't really even access from the front. You're accessing from inside the garage. But the point is, from this definition, you could have a 50 to 60-foot house depending on how high the garage is and how high the primary front door is on top of that garage. And this is what my concern is about this definition.
And why didn't we like the average finished lot grade?
Well, because it gives us a lot of variability, variety, I should say, of different, sizes of, grade, first of all.
Right.
And then if somebody wants to, put more dirt on there, then you've got that dirt plus, you've got different levels of dirt. And a lot of people are, putting more dirt on top of their property as well. So when you start saying average, you're talking about the dirt that they're now bringing in to, grade higher. So,
Average existing lot grade?
I just think there is so much play in that definition. But if you keep it at where the street level is, there is a street, unless you've got these houses that drop below, then you've got another issue coming in that may have to go with a variance.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Well, what concerns me about this, and I certainly like Kelly's idea of over 30 feet throughout, because what happens is, and certainly it's happened in the campgrounds, you have 35 feet, and then they go to the Board of Appeals, they get a variance, they can go up above 3 stories and then the house collapses because structurally it's not sound and it can't be supported. And it seems to me we're going to go around this again and again. We're going to address this issue as long as there's this play in the, now it strikes me, I was comfortable before with the 35 feet. Now it strikes me
Go lower.
with the peak. And I mean, there's not even, Chris speaks about, well, the variation depending on the building. And here we're never going to be able to get a consistency and an overall compliance. We're still going to have the variation as long as we have this,
Unless you have it where the peak is at 35 feet from the original grade or the graded level, the original grade level. And then it has to have at least a sloping roof of a certain degree, which is, I think that should be part of the definition, that there has to be at least a sloping roof of some degree. You can't have a flat roof. There shouldn't be, because every flat roof goes bad anyway after 5 years. So there should never be a flat roof anyway, unless it's all metal. But, it should have some sloped roof as part of the definition, perhaps. Is that a possibility, Mr. Kubiak?
Yeah, you could require that. Sure.
Is there any legal basis for, we have the compatibility built into the district descriptions. So if the neighboring houses all have sloped roofs, can we require somebody who tries to come in with a flat roof to slope their roof, even though it takes away their living space?
There are examples of codes, and I believe I've drafted these, yes, that not only that, but the roof orientation has to comply with the predominant roof orientation on the street. So if everybody's roof is with A-frame facing the street, that's how yours is going to be, versus it facing this way. So yeah, you could do that. But in the purpose statements of the ordinance that you do, it has to be clear that you're doing it as a way of protecting aesthetic qualities, protecting views. It can't simply be arbitrary, but you can establish those types of standards.
Okay, go ahead. Lauren.
How are we going to bring this to our meeting to get the height hammered out?
Mr. Kubiak, would you like to write something up that would bring all these elements in?
Yeah, but there are a number of elements around the
Something that we
topic
could
right now.
provide to the town council that would bring in this element of a sloped roof, that would reach the top of 35, and you basically would start at either street level or, some finished grade level.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to say finished grade level because that would bring in infill to raise up the property. So I'm thinking perhaps, I don't know, what does everybody think? Maybe something to
I
say
really think average existing lot grade,
is,
like, to keep us from having very tall structures on one side.
can a
of
developer
slope.
take an average existing lot grade and abuse that?
No, it would be the opposite. The developer would have less space to maneuver.
I see it from both perspectives. I think it could be disadvantageous for just regular mom and pop who want to build a house if they've got a slope dropping off behind them. It could also be advantageous if it's a larger type of structure and you've locked in that type of measurement, then you're going to bring down the size overall. So I just haven't thought it through.
Do you think that by the next meeting, you can come up with something that would allow us to incorporate these elements and get it to the town council in a way that we could somewhat agree with here at this dais?
And if I could just kind of paraphrase, we're talking about 35 feet max,
Yes,
right?
yes,
Slope roof.
yes.
And point of measurement is either, I would imagine, either the average along the front or the average around the perimeter of the building. Pre-development.
Yes.
You
I
say
go
yes.
with that. I
but-
could probably go-
Everybody
I'd
else
go
is
with
saying
something
yes.
like that.
Uh,
Something like that.
So I think that's the most complicated part of the sort of definition. But I
Right.
think what we would do is take the definition that's in the code now and incorporate these terms into the definition. So
Except
it's-
take out the fact that it would be, wait a minute, well, I don't know how you incorporate it because you're having a level of finished lot grade, which could add another 20 feet to any grade. And then primary front entrance could be 20 feet high. So I don't know how you
No,
would
no,
even.
no, no, no. I don't think that's the case. I can say that I've never made that interpretation. When I see grade,
But you
I
can look
mean
at
the
North
ground.
Beach and see that that's what's going on right now in North Beach.
Maybe, but in Chesapeake Beach, grade means ground. And so it's 35 feet from the ground up, not 35 feet from something under the front door. Okay. So
Madam Chair, did
Yes.
we look at the previous building height definition? That was
That was what he just read.
August 25th, the one that was submitted of
Oh,
the height of any
yeah, we haven't
building.
talked about that one. Yeah, that's a whole different, that's a different one yet. Did you want to read that one?
Sure.
Yeah.
This is 290-43, terms defined. The height of any building shall be the vertical distance of the highest point of the roof to the average natural grade level prior to construction or any site improvements. The highest point also includes any rooftop deck, fence, railing, widow's walk, or other rooftop addition that is used as an accessory structure.
That's in our code now?
No, that is actually St. Michael's. That was a St. Michael's code.
That's great.
And that was pretty much what we were, we had talked about a while back, actually. I think I talked to you about that. But it doesn't include the slope of the roof, which, because you could still have a flat roof with this particular definition. You know what I'm saying? Want to read it again? Want to read it again? Want to read it one more time? Just, okay, everybody listen quickly and let's see if we like this.
The height of any building shall be the vertical distance of the highest point of the roof to the average natural grade level prior to construction or any site improvements. The highest point also includes any rooftop deck, fence, railing, widow's walk, or other rooftop addition that is used as an accessory structure.
Yeah, it doesn't include that roof slope that we need, though. You could have flat roofs with that
Right, but
definition.
Chris said that we could say that the roof isn't compatible if it's flat with the other buildings in the neighborhood. So I think that's a great definition, and it's tried and true in St. Michael's.
Why do people want a flat roof, especially with the snow?
He's talking to himself. I'm not watching.
Yeah, I think we add another amendment here that says the slope of a roof should match the orientation, predominant orientation of the street or something like I mentioned earlier. That would basically mean you can't come up with a flat roof. It has to be a sloped roof, or a roof shall be sloped and shall match the predominant orientation of the roof lines on the street.
So
Or
that has to
within-
be added to that definition then.
Yeah, I was thinking that we could sort of encapsulate all this into a definition, but that's really a standard. I think we almost
It
got
is a
to
standard, but I mean, I'm thinking
add it to.
that means we have to add this plus another standard to the recommendation. Should we give that to Mr. Jakubiec and then allow him to add a standard so we can have all of that to come back with and
Yeah.
approve it or not? That would be outstanding if we can do that.
Madam Chair,
That's
I have a
great.
question.
Yes, Kelly.
Mr. Kubiak, Ridgefield Station, Stream Walkway, would this, the permits are already approved, would this affect them or no?
Yeah, I think so.
This would affect an approved permit?
Yeah, so the lots are approved. They have a legal right to apply for a zoning permit. And as part of that, they submit a plan. And as part of the plan, I'll say, well, we've got to apply a new definition for building height. I'll need you to establish the average grade around the building, and that will be the basis for applying the height standard. So those, they don't exist yet. They're only lots.
Okay, so this will affect Crestview, and this will affect Streamwalk.
Building an addition on their house or building a third floor on their house. Yeah.
Thank you. Lori, anything? Are we
No,
Done with height?
I think that's a good course of
and
action.
okay, both of you all agree. Okay,
Yes.
good.
Let's
Let's
definition.
excellent.
and-
let's move on to then number
So let the record show there's consensus.
yes, let the
and
record
then
show there
vote,
is
okay, that's what
consensus,
we're
I
doing.
think,
Okay.
on asking you to go ahead and develop that for the next agenda, please, for, I guess we're going to move it to September. I'll talk to everybody about that later. But, okay, so number 5, table 1, permitted uses by district. We're going to look at the RC right now. Okay, I know that Kathleen, you were re-examining the RC and its permitted uses. What did you come up with there? Some ideas here that we can go over.
Yeah, Jan and I looked at these RC uses and with particular focus on those, I guess, conditional uses or permitted uses. Specifically, if it was a permitted use or a special exception, we kind of focused on that specifically in the RC area as a matter of protection and just to make sure that it just wasn't, just a given, but to actually give some serious consideration to the impact on the infrastructure. So in doing that, we went through the entire table and we came up with some recommendations.
And what might they be?
So, for example, items 1 through 12, we had no changes on the use. So number 1 through number 12, we didn't have any changes under RC.
Kathleen, would you like, I made copies of that. Would you like
Yes.
everybody to have a copy
Excellent.
of that?
If we could have copies of what,
That way they can follow.
has been
No,
revised. that'd
just
be
me,
excellent.
Sharon, not any. Yes.
We are so goofy tonight. What happened to all of us?
We cried.
I know. We got hot out there. I know.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for making these copies.
Without her.
Chris, do you have one?
No, I don't.
Oh,
We don't want him to have any of this. Secret between all of us.
Oh,
We're starting at number 13, it looks like, for changes.
so number 13 was permitted under RC, and then we changed it so that for environmental science, research, and educational uses, nature centers, that is no longer a permitted use, it's a conditional use based on those, I guess, nine recommendations. So it was changed from permitted to conditional with the following conditions: no mixed uses, commercial or residential, no removal of trees, fines of $5,000 per tree will be imposed, no new impervious roads will be allowed, all building materials will limit how much impervious materials are used, no vehicles over 10,000 pounds, and no trucks will be allowed. All new or rebuilt structures must comply with new building height restrictions. No new septics allowed except for existing structures, and no more than 2 accessory structures per lot.
Okay, comments on any of those, Kelly? Have you, nobody's had time to read these, have they? Okay, and Jan, you probably know what some of these are.
Yeah, but one of the things that I wanted to bring up is something I mentioned recently, and that is all new and the rebuilt structure does not have to comply to the new height, correct?
That's grandfathered, right, Chris?
Yes. Well,
Yes. So this would be just new.
I have a related question.
Yes.
Not with the table of uses, but can we add into the resource conservation district description that it is a non-residential district?
I don't think that would be true, though, because we do have residences in the RC, don't we, Mr. Kubiak?
Right, but they would
I
be
think-
non-conforming, like we have lots of non-conforming uses.
Mr. Kubiak, opinion on that one?
I think it just states the obvious. It's already part of the revised purpose statement. It says no residential, or it says there's kind of exclusionary language about residential not being allowed. So
I
don't
think
know why that would
I
be a
think the
problem.
one thing that I was concerned about was the intent. There was a word intense development. But what does anybody else think about the idea that Lori has that we should put non-residential in the definition?
I agree with Lori.
Okay.
We all see that we can rezone it. So
Okay.
it could be rezoned, and this way it would just protect it one more level.
Okay, Jan, what are your thoughts? And Kat, what do you think?
Yep.
You want to go non-residential? You want to add that? Kat, what do you think?
Sure, if it further safeguards the area.
I think one point that we are noting is that sometimes things have a way of changing if they have, they're just some ways things are modified if we don't strictly enforce certain things. I would also like to take the word intense out of development. You know how it says intense. Where's the definition? Do we even have the definition? Where did I put my definition of that?
Talking about the purpose statement for
Yeah,
RC?
do you have that
It's
new
in the
one?
package of zoning text amendments.
Oh, okay.
One of the amendment
Yeah,
7 maybe.
Okay, so it says the resource conservation district is intended to protect and maintain wetlands, surface waters, steep slopes, forest areas.
Where are you reading?
I was reading the definition of resource conservation. Is this not the current definition? I think that's the current one.
Under the amendments?
Yeah, under the amendments. The Resource Conservation District is intended to protect and maintain wetlands, surface waters, steep slopes, forests, areas with elevated risks of flooding, and other environmentally sensitive areas to provide locations for parkland, flood management, recreation activities, and access to the water and bay to avoid intense development. I almost like to take that word intense out because I don't want us to think of any development as being intense at all. So I think we should take the word intense out. That's my idea.
You already did that. I think you're reading from a previous version.
Am I reading an old one?
Yeah, the version that went to the public hearing is.
I'm so
Kathleen's version,
sorry.
and
I've
she
got so many
eliminated that.
versions. I'm
Yeah.
now getting,
Yes, we
I'm
do.
now getting.
No
That would
wonder
be
I
the point
couldn't
where
find it.
I didn't think we took that out.
That's page 5 of 7.
I am so sorry.
This is Amendment 7, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you see Amendment 7.
I am so sorry.
Never mind. Yeah, see, it's struck
Yes.
through.
Thank you. All right. You know what, Kat, you better read it because I want to make sure I've got the right one now, the right new one.
Resource Conservation District. The Resource Conservation District is intended to protect and maintain wetlands, surface waters, forests, and open space, steep slopes, as well as low-lying areas with elevated risk of flooding. The RC District is intended to protect and maintain land use in critical flood and stormwater management, to provide land for community parks and recreational activities, including access to the bay and its tributaries, to ensure that any new use complies with all environmental protection and land use laws and preservation agreements of the town of Chesapeake Beach and the state of Maryland, to allow the town of Chesapeake Beach to acquire land to ensure its preservation and prevent residential development where all parcels that were dedicated for open space, forest conservation, stormwater management, and wildlife habitats as a condition for the development of previously approved residential plan communities or for communities built on lands annexed through the town's growth allocation floating district, (paren).
Thank you. And so if Lori, you thought that we needed to add non-residential, then you would have to bring a motion around at the next meeting to include that in that definition.
Okay.
So you're welcome to do that.
Would I have support for that if I brought that?
No residential, not.
I mean,
Yeah.
non-residential. I'm
What I
sorry.
would say
Yeah,
is
not-
It
whatever.
is intended to be a non-residential district.
So you
That
would,
would be,
yeah, you could bring that up if you'd like to add to that definition.
okay, I will make that
Let's
motion.
continue with, so let's go back over these conditions then that you just brought forward. So the conditions, Mr. Kubiak, when you look at these conditions, are there any conditions that look totally unreasonable to you as far as inclusion?
As we deviate a little bit, can I just say something about this this?
Oh,
resource
sorry.
cost before we leave it? Because
Sure.
I wanted to have an opportunity to bring up something to you, and
Sure.
if I don't now, I might forget it.
Sure.
Part of the statement, and I don't want to dwell on it, I'll just pass it,
Sure.
put it for passing, and then we'll just make a note of it in minutes. Where it says, part of the statement says, of the purpose statement says, to allow the town of Chesapeake Beach to acquire land to ensure its preservation. We don't want, as a purpose statement of a zoning district that regulates development, to say our purpose is to acquire land.
Exactly. You're so right.
Right.
You are
I
so
couldn't
right.
ask for more.
Thank you.
So I don't know what the right word is, but I just we'll fix that, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Otherwise, it's very comprehensive. It covers all the bases, but I think that just.
Do we need to bring forth a motion at the next meeting in order to modify that? Then it looks like we're going to have to do something like that.
Yeah. Kathleen, would you like me to come up with language, or you can, you're the.
Sure.
Okay. All right. I'll
Okay,
come up
thank
with some
you.
kind of language.
So Kathleen,
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. That makes total sense. I don't know.
can I call you and then you can just put both motions together at once?
Okay.
Okay. You'll bring the motion.
Okay. So.
So where do we, yeah,
So you
and
want to
you
just
can just
modify the entire, okay.
illuminate, me as far as where you want that language
Yep.
inserted. Okay, great.
Okay, without violating any laws here. Okay, let's go back to the conditions then. So,
Okay, so we're talking about the conditions that should attach to the use called environmental science, research, and educational uses, nature centers.
yes.
So first, it says no mixed uses, commercial, residential. Uh, There would be no, there's no residential anyway. First of all, it's just not allowed. It's not a permitted use. And this is not a commercial use. The condition should address the impacts of the use. Now, you might say, well, what happens if the science center has a little sales venue, like you could walk through the museum, then on the way out, you have to buy something, like the typical museum or science center. That seems to me is the only type of commercial uses. If I was applying the standard and someone was coming with an application, I'd say, sorry, you can't do that element of your project because it has a commercial element to it. Is that what you meant to avoid, or you're avoiding the possibility that someone would open up a restaurant or something like that on the property, unrelated to this center, the environmental center?
Yeah, I was thinking of more with the traditional meaning of commercial, so
Okay.
that from a business
Yeah.
aspect.
That I would say that wouldn't be allowed. The only thing that's allowed is the use, which would be in this case research center, environmental center, and things that are naturally accessory to it. So if you had a biological lab, it seems like that would be accessory. It would be a small part of the research center, or classroom space. That would kind of be, or, guided tours to the water's edge. Those would be accessory types of uses that would be permitted, but there wouldn't be a commercial use allowed. So I don't think there's a concern about that. The use is what it is. It's there on the table.
But Mr. Kubiak, could you also have, like in the educational use, could you possibly find that somebody would want to have a camp where you're, camping out, or not camping out, but having like
Bring a group of students.
group of
4-H.
students and they stay there overnight. In California, they have these things where you stay overnight for a week, you do science camp, and you have all these students stay, and they have a place for them to stay overnight. And so they have basically a institutionalized camping ground type situation where you actually have sort of a mixed use in the sense that you're having residential camping, plus you're having, maybe the science center plus commercial, let's buy, because they also had, okay, let's go buy little masks, or, look like a pirate, or whatever the thing is. But I'm just saying, is this something that we would want to take out of this, or we would leave it in just to make sure that the particular use is pure and not adulterated with, different types of possible potential misuses or abuses?
Yeah.
Thing here.
Yeah. It seems to me that the use is what it is, and if it were a nature center that you had to pay to visit, would that exclude it? It would clearly be commercial. Someone would be commercial venture. Someone would.
That would be a could you put in for profit, or could you put in nonprofit, or could you put in, I see the point here where you don't want to have a bunch of campgrounds with a bunch of students coming and, I know that, Kelly's talking about how we've got kids going up and destroying some of the forests and, burning some of the forest down and whatnot. I'm just concerned about.
You could say, accessory uses shall not include campgrounds or commercial venues or anything that's not intrinsically related to the mission of the environmental center or the research center. There's some broad statement that kind of gets to.
Okay. All right.
You think that covers it better than the no mixed uses, commercial or residential?
I just don't, I just, yeah, I'm just, I don't know how, because I think that actually addresses the real possibilities that you might have. Despite, of course, we already know that can't have commercial uses and residential uses, because the only use that's allowed is an environmental center, research and educational uses, nature centers. And we know in the resource conservation district, there are no residential uses allowed, you know? So I think one way of doing it would be to say accessory uses shall only be those intrinsically related, maybe even like low impact uses that are intrinsically related to the educational mission, educational research mission of the principal use. Something like that. Because then it clearly is like, okay, well, I got a research center here. I could do a lab. I can have my scientists go out, or I could do planting of native species to see how they grow, or collect insects, or build sheds to hold specimens, or
So you're
classroom
saying make it
space.
very specific
Yeah.
as far as low impact accessory uses have to be low impact without any negatively impacting environmental uses. So in other words, we have to be a little more detailed as far as.
Yeah, and I maybe overplaying this idea of low impact. That's an important statement, but it's also kind of ambiguous. But the key is that the accessory uses are not commercial, they're not residential. They're tied to the mission of the center. You can't just say, oh, we're going to have a
ice cream cones.
yeah, we're going to have a snowball stand set up here so that our customers on the way out can park on this little meadow we created and have snowballs or ice cream, or it's like, no, they have to be technically and intrinsically related to the mission of the environmental science, research, and educational use.
Okay, could we all agree that maybe we need some
Space food.
language? Mr. Jakubiec, could you come up with some language that would perhaps?
I just did. Intrinsically related to the mission of the environmental science, research, educational, and nature use.
Did you write that down?
No.
We need that written down. Did you write that down? It was good. I liked it.
The key is, I think, intrinsically related. I'm thinking about how kind of we as zoning administrators apply these things.
Yes,
And
exactly.
we have a basis for
agree.
judging whether something is out of bounds now.
Okay, and then let's go to the next one. What
Wait,
about-
excuse me.
Yes, Kelly.
On 13, I have on the third one down, no removal of trees, fines of $1,000, trees will be imposed. Can you help me understand that conditional? Since we will be rezoning around Richfield Station and a lot of that land will become RC now, I'm concerned about this because there are a lot of trees around the houses that will potentially affect it. We had one about a year ago that was on the developer's land, and we had to work to get it taken down. So if something happens and this tree needs to be taken down, what is the condition that the homeowner or Richfield Station will have to go to? What's the process? Because you're now putting this that no tree can be taken down, where we had a tree that was potentially could have wiped out a whole row of townhouses.
Good point. So this particular set of conditions would apply only if there was an educational center being proposed. You as the planning commission would say, we would approve this site plan, except that you're proposing to remove these trees, so we can't approve it.
Okay.
I mean, it just applies to this environmental center use. What you're talking about is another issue entirely, and important, particularly since those are forest conservation areas. But what Kelly's saying is relevant to how reasonable a condition like this is. Is it reasonable to expect that some development could take place on land and not remove a tree in a land that's forested? I don't think so. So if you have some RC areas that are along here, the big tract of land that is shown as RC that could literally be developed today, if you did a research center there, you couldn't do one there without removing a tree. But we have the forest conservation ordinance that would come into play if a tract is 40,000 square feet in size or larger. But I think a standard that spoke to the essential nature of or requirement to preserve trees to the maximum extent possible is a reasonable way of putting it. And then when we saw a plan, we'd say, you don't need to remove these trees. All we're going to allow is you to remove the trees necessary to make this project work, not full scale clearing.
But how do you keep, some other group from coming in, like, let's just say the Board of Appeals or whoever might end up with this, from saying, oh, sure, just go ahead and level, well, that's, do fees in lieu of, et cetera. I mean, how do we do that? How do we protect it so that it's just not mass?
With this stand, you're putting basically a use condition. That is not appealable to them, or it's not, there's no variance. There's no
Okay,
appeal
yeah,
to the
that's
Board of
true.
Appeals.
That's true. This would not go to the board. Okay.
And you administer this as part of your site plan review process, or I would administer if someone said, I'd like to do this use, Chris, what are my conditions?
Okay.
Right there in the code, it says you can't remove trees, and that removal of excess trees would violate the terms of this. So I would say something to standard that said, to the extent possible, trees shall be preserved. And then you, as reviewing a site plan, would judge whether they've done that or not to the extent possible.
Excellent. Can we have you come up with language to incorporate that one? I think
I just
these
did,
are
to the
good.
extent possible.
Did you get that one written down?
I think that's really critical because I know, Chris, you're familiar with the situation up on B Street where they were beginning to clear the land, and the landscaper was totally unfamiliar with the trees on the property, and they took down 110-year-old